It was a cold and seemingly calm morning when 5 heavily armed figures silently infiltrated Pahalgam, a popular tourist area in the Kashmir region of northern India. Beneath the shadows of the trees and amidst an idyllic landscape, reality would soon reveal its darkest and most ruthless face. The 5 men, armed with M4 carbines and AK-47 rifles, advanced with a terrifying and clear purpose: to spread absolute terror. Inspired by brutal tactics reminiscent of recent horrors in Israel, they began intercepting innocent tourists. Their macabre mission was simple and merciless: to identify who was Muslim and who was not. One by one, the tourists were stopped and forced under threat of death to recite verses from the Quran. Those who succeeded were released, traumatized, but alive. However, those who failed the religious test were subjected to another humiliating and terrifying verification. They were forced to partially undress to check if they were circumcised, a practice common in the Islamic faith, but not among Hindus. Those unfortunate enough to fail both tests, mainly Hindu men, were executed on the spot, without mercy. And it didn't end there. The terrorists made sure that their families, friends, and especially their children witnessed these atrocities. These acts had an added goal: to inflict deep, lasting psychological trauma on the survivors, a wound that would never truly heal. The attack left dozens of victims and an entire nation in uncontrollable rage. Images of the horror quickly spread across the world, but what would come next was even more dramatic and dangerous. In New Delhi, the Indian capital, the government reacted with unprecedented fury and determination. The Prime Minister called an emergency meeting with top military officials and made a decision that would change history forever. This cannot go unpunished. We will take firm and decisive action against the terrorists and those who support them. This declaration was a clear and resounding sentence of war, aimed not only at the terrorists, but directly at Pakistan, whom India openly accused of harboring and funding these extremist groups. Within hours, the skies over Pakistan and the Pakistan-controlled region of Kashmir witnessed a hellish storm. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of missiles launched from Indian territory struck with devastating precision at 9 strategic points linked to terrorist organizations. From camps in remote forests to urban hideouts, the targets were completely destroyed. But amid this military response, a surprise emerged that no one had fully anticipated: China's ambiguous and disturbing silence. Traditionally a solid ally and Pakistan's iron brother since 1951, China did not offer its usual strong condemnation of India. Instead, Beijing issued lukewarm statements, diplomatically concerned but lacking any real support. This silence was far too significant to go unnoticed. What was really happening in Beijing's circles of power? Why was China, the historical ally that had invested tens of billions of dollars in Pakistan through the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, now seemingly retreating just when its support was most needed? Questions began to emerge around the world. Analysts and international media sought answers to China's apparent contradiction. On one hand, Beijing had maintained close economic and strategic ties with Islamabad for years, investing in vital infrastructure like ports, roads, and energy plants, turning Pakistan into a key financial partner. On the other hand, recent tensions with the United States had forced China to reconsider its diplomatic and commercial relations across Asia, particularly with India, a potentially lucrative and necessary partner in the context of its trade war with the West. But what had become painfully clear was that Pakistan was increasingly isolated amid this crisis. As its territory burned under the weight of India's offensive, Pakistani leaders slowly came to realize a devastating truth: China might be reconsidering its strategic loyalties, and that spelled total catastrophe for Islamabad. Even more worrying was the quick and undeniable evidence that Chinese weaponry in Pakistani hands was failing miserably. Radar and air defense systems, supposedly advanced and marketed by China as reliable in real combat, proved utterly ineffective. This was humiliatingly exposed when India managed to shoot down a modern JF-17 Thunder fighter jet, a source of pride for Pakistan's Air Force and built with Chinese technology. For both countries, but especially for Beijing, this event was a global public humiliation. As the world watched in shock, intelligence leaks began to reveal secret meetings between China and India shortly after the attack in Pakistan. These high-level meetings hinted at something much deeper and potentially explosive, a tacit understanding or strategic pact between these two Asian giants. Why would China be willing to secretly engage with India just as Pakistan desperately needed its support? Some analysts quickly speculated about the existence of a third, even more dangerous threat, one that was forcing these powers to unite. Perhaps an emerging terrorist organization armed with advanced weapons, or even a foreign power seeking to further destabilize the region. Others suggested that China simply saw this crisis as an opportunity to redefine the balance of power in Asia. If Pakistan could no longer offer stability or results, perhaps it was time to bet on a pragmatic alliance with India, despite their historic rivalries. Whatever the reason, one thing was certain: this Chinese betrayal was a direct stab to Pakistan's strategic heart. As smoke continued to rise from the ruins in Pakistan, the world held its breath. How far would India go in its revenge? Would China really abandon its ally in the worst crisis of its recent history? The answers to these questions could determine not only the fate of Asia, but the stability of the entire world. The knife in the back had been plunged. Now it remained to be seen how deep the wound would go. While the smoke had yet to clear from the rubble of the attacks in Kashmir, and Pakistan struggled to grasp the magnitude of the blow, another story was beginning to take shape. Far from the battlefield, in carpeted halls and soundproof offices. A series of discreet yet highly significant meetings were taking place between two actors that, until recently, seemed destined for mutual distrust: India and China. According to Western intelligence sources and media outlets specializing in geopolitics, high-ranking Chinese government officials held closed-door meetings with Indian diplomatic and military delegations just 48 hours after the terrorist attack in Pahalgam and India's subsequent retaliation. There were no official statements, no press conferences, no leaks in state-controlled media, but satellite reports of diplomatic travel, aircraft movements between Beijing and New Delhi, and anomalous activity at their respective embassies began to raise suspicions. Why would China, Pakistan's eternal defender in international forums, sit down to negotiate with its historical rival precisely when Islamabad needed its support the most? The answer, though buried under layers of strategy, seems to come in two dimensions: fear and opportunity. A new enemy, more feared than Pakistan or India? One of the most sensational hypotheses, though no less credible in intelligence circles, points to the emergence of a third threat, a non-state actor with advanced weaponry capabilities. There are whispers of a transnational terrorist organization stockpiling Western-made weapons and drones of suspicious origin in a region near the tri-border area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China. This group may have been directly or indirectly behind the Pahalgam attack, and its true aim could be to sow chaos, fracture traditional alliances, and trigger a regional conflict that would weaken both China and India, the two largest powers in Asia. In that scenario, a temporary collaboration between New Delhi and Beijing wouldn't be a betrayal of Pakistan, but a survival pact. A kind of unspoken agreement to avoid being caught off guard by a darker, more unpredictable force, one that could tear through both nations with unconventional violence. Beijing's cold calculation sacrificing the pawn to save the queen? But there's another interpretation, much colder, and far more strategic. For years, China has watched its investment in Pakistan, over $60 billion poured into the China-Pakistan economic corridor, fail to deliver the expected returns. Corruption, sabotage, security failures in Balochistan, and persistent delays have turned the flagship project of the new Silk Road into a logistical nightmare. Meanwhile, India, despite its historic tensions with Beijing, remains an emerging superpower with a more dynamic economy, a massive internal market, and a key position in the face of growing Western pressure in the Indo-Pacific. What if China has decided to switch horses midstream? Letting Pakistan fall at its most vulnerable moment would be an unthinkable move, but not an impossible one. A cynical move, yes, but perhaps a necessary one to redraw the regional chessboard and curb U.S. influence in Asia. China knows it cannot fight a trade war with Washington, a military standoff with Taiwan, and carry the burden of an unstable, dependent partner like Pakistan. Signs of a shift: China's tepid response, India's quiet gestures. Instead of its usual aggressive rhetoric, China issued vague statements expressing concern over the escalation, but stopping short of condemning India's actions. At the same time, India has softened its stance on minor border disputes and allowed the resumption of trade channels with Chinese firms, suspended during the pandemic. In diplomacy, silences carry more weight than words, and China's silence in the face of a massacre on friendly territory was, for Islamabad, a screaming betrayal. A senior Pakistani official, speaking under anonymity, summed it up this way: "China isn't abandoning us, it already has, it just did it quietly."